My name is Diana Downing. I'm 30 years old, and 3 days ago, I discovered the man I was supposed to marry had stolen my dead grandmother's funeral dress and turned it into a wedding fashion statement for Instagram. Even now, saying it out loud makes me feel insane. I keep replaying everything in my head, trying to pinpoint the exact second my relationship stopped being loving and started becoming something uglier. Maybe it happened long before I noticed. Maybe love just blinded me to it. My grandmother, Eleanor Downing, raised me after my parents' divorce destroyed whatever stability I had as a kid. My father worked offshore for months at a time. My mother had problems nobody in the family wanted to discuss openly. Grandma stepped in without hesitation. She became my home, my routine, my safety net. She packed my lunches, stayed awake helping me study, sat beside me during nightmares when I was too embarrassed to admit I still had them at 14. She was the person who taught me what unconditional love actually looked like. When she died 2 years ago, it felt like somebody cut the roots out from under my life. I inherited a few personal things after the estate settled. Some jewelry, her recipe cards, a pearl necklace she treasured, and one black silk dress. The dress mattered more than anything else. Vintage 1950s, high neckline, 3/4 sleeves, elegant and severe at the same time. Every woman in my family recognized it instantly because Grandma wore it to funerals for 40 years. Her husband's funeral, her brother's funeral, her best friend's memorial. My aunt used to joke the dress had attended more funerals than some pastors. When Grandma passed away, I specifically asked for it. Not because I planned to wear it, because it smelled faintly like White Shoulder's perfume. Because touching it felt like touching the last physical trace of her still left in the world. I kept it sealed carefully inside a garment bag at the back of my closet. My fiancé knew exactly what it was. His name was Adrian Cole. We'd been together for 2.5 years and engaged for 7 months. Until recently, I genuinely believed he was the love of my life. Early in our relationship, I showed him the dress. I remember sitting on the bedroom floor telling him the history behind it while trying not to cry. He held my hand and told me it was beautiful that I loved my grandmother so deeply. That memory feels poisonous now. 3 weeks ago, Adrian started obsessing over wedding aesthetics. At first, it seemed harmless. He showed me black tuxedos, dramatic tailoring, vintage inspirations. Then one night, he came home grinning like he'd just solved a puzzle. "I figured it out," he announced. I looked up from the couch. "Figured what out?" "My wedding outfit." I smiled. "Okay." "I'm wearing black." I laughed softly. "Like black accents?" "No," he said proudly. "Full black. Completely black." Honestly, I didn't care. I'm not controlling. If wearing black made him happy, fine. It was his wedding too. So I shrugged and said, "Then wear black." For one strange second, disappointment crossed his face. Like he expected an argument and didn't know what to do without one. But then he smiled again. "Trust me," he said. "People are going to lose their minds when they see it." I should have paid attention to that sentence. Last Tuesday, he posted a mirror selfie to Instagram, first on his story, then permanently on his feed. The caption read, "Not your grandmother's wedding, #breaking tradition, #black wedding." He stood there smiling proudly in a black silk dress with a high neckline and 3/4 sleeves. My grandmother's dress. At first I didn't fully recognize it. He'd styled it differently, added a belt, changed the silhouette slightly. But something about the neckline made my stomach tighten. I walked to my closet, opened the garment bag. Empty. I just stood there staring at it while this horrible ringing filled my ears. That moment when your body realizes something terrible before your mind catches up. Then I grabbed my phone again and zoomed into the photo. The silk, the sleeves, the shape. No doubt. The same dress my grandmother wore, burying the people she loved most in the world, was now being used as edgy wedding content online. I called Adrian immediately. No answer. I texted him, "Is that my grandmother's dress?" 20 minutes later, he replied, "Babe, relax. It was sitting in your closet unused, and honestly, it's perfect for the vibe." The vibe. I stared at those words until my vision blurred. Then another message came. "I thought you'd be touched. I wanted to honor her." Honor her. By turning her morning dress into an Instagram accessory. I sat on the edge of my bed, pressing my palms against my eyes because I could physically feel something inside me breaking. Not anger yet. Something deeper. The kind of hurt that settles directly into your chest and stays there. Finally, I replied, "That dress was not yours to take. We need to talk in person." His response came almost immediately. "You're being dramatic. It's literally just fabric." Just fabric. Not the dress my grandmother wore while saying goodbye to everyone she loved. Not the dress she stood in while comforting grieving relatives for decades. Not the last thing I had that still smelled like her perfume. Just fabric. I stopped responding after that, because I knew if I kept typing, I'd say something irreversible. Instead, I sent the photo to my Aunt Linda, my grandmother's daughter. She called me within 3 minutes, already crying. "Diana, baby, is that your grandmother's funeral dress?" Hearing someone else say it out loud made the whole thing suddenly real in the worst possible way. "Yes." Silence. Then her voice changed completely. That dangerous southern quietness before fury arrives. "Send me the picture." Within 2 hours, my entire family knew. My uncle texted me, "Handle this before I do." My cousin Vanessa called sobbing because Grandma wore that dress to her mother's funeral. "That dress isn't fashion," she whispered. "It's grief." Meanwhile, Adrian sat online, replying to compliments with black heart emojis, while strangers called him iconic and fearless. He had absolutely no idea what was coming. And the most humiliating part? I still loved him then. Even after seeing the empty garment bag, some pathetic, hopeful part of me still believed there had to be a misunderstanding big enough to save us. But deep down, another voice had already started whispering the truth. People who truly love you do not steal your grief for attention. The day after my aunt saw the photo, I came home from work and immediately knew Adrian was trying to control the situation, before I even opened my mouth. Candles lit, wine poured, pasta cooking. The entire apartment smelled like garlic and manipulation. He smiled when I walked in, like nothing catastrophic had happened. "Hey babe, I made your favorite." I didn't even take my coat off. "I need the dress back." His smile froze for half a second. "Can we eat first?" "No, the dress." Something changed in his eyes then. The warmth disappeared, but the smile stayed, which somehow felt worse. "I don't have it here." Every muscle in my body tightened. "What do you mean?" "It's at the tailor." For a moment, I genuinely couldn't process the sentence. "You what?" He sighed dramatically, like I was exhausting him already. "I had it altered slightly. The waist needed adjusting and the hem was too long." My stomach dropped so hard, it physically hurt. "You altered my grandmother's dress?" "I'm making it fit properly for the wedding," he snapped. "I thought you'd appreciate me incorporating something meaningful from your family." I stared at him in disbelief. "You stole a dead woman's funeral dress from my closet, posted it online for attention, and now you've permanently altered it without asking me." His expression hardened immediately. "You're making this sound criminal." "It is criminal, Adrian." "Oh my God, Diana, listen to yourself. It's fabric." There it was again.
Fabric.
Every single time I tried explaining the emotional significance of the dress, he reduced it to material value, because acknowledging the truth would mean admitting what he did was cruel. I took a slow breath because I could feel myself shaking. That dress smelled like my grandmother. That landed. Not emotionally, not fully. But I saw the flicker of realization hit him for the first time, that this situation might not simply disappear if he rolled his eyes hard enough. Still, instead of apologizing, he doubled down. "She's gone, Diana. The dress was collecting dust. I gave it purpose." I think that was the exact moment something inside me started dying. Not exploding. Dying quietly. I asked him for the tailor's name. He hesitated before giving it to me, probably assuming there was nothing I could do now that alterations had started. I left without touching the dinner. The tailor shop was closed by the time I arrived, but I called the emergency number posted on the door and left a voicemail explaining the situation as calmly as I could. The owner called me the next morning. Older woman. Gentle voice. When I explained that the garment belonged to my late grandmother and had been brought in without my permission, she went silent for several seconds. Then softly she said, "Oh, honey." That almost broke me right there. She explained they had already adjusted the waist, but preserved the original seams because the dress was vintage. But the hem... The hem had already been cut. 2 inches gone, forever. Because Adrian thought shorter looked more dramatic. I picked the dress up that afternoon. The tailor handed it to me inside a fresh garment bag and looked genuinely heartbroken. "If I'd known," she said quietly, "I never would have touched it." I thanked her, carried the bag home, and sat on my bedroom floor, staring at the dress for almost an hour. It looked wrong. Subtly wrong, but wrong enough that I couldn't stop seeing it. Like someone had cropped the bottom off an old family photograph. It was still Grandma's dress. But now it carried someone else's selfishness stitched directly into it. That night, Adrian came over. The second he saw the garment bag hanging in the closet, his entire posture changed. "So you went behind my back and got it from the tailor?" I laughed once because the audacity almost impressed me. "Behind your back? It's my dress." "I was bringing it back after the wedding." "You cut the hem." "By 2 inches, Diana." "You permanently altered an irreplaceable piece of my grandmother's life without permission." "And you're acting like I destroyed her ashes." The room went dead silent after that. Even he looked shocked hearing himself say it out loud. I whispered, "Do you hear yourself?" Instead of apologizing, he got angry. "I'm angry because you care more about a dress than our future." "No," I said quietly. "I care that you care more about aesthetics than my grief." For the first time since this started, he didn't have an immediate comeback. He grabbed his overnight bag and muttered, "Maybe you should think about your priorities." Then he left. The next day, his mother called me. And suddenly, Adrian's behavior made horrifying sense. "Adrian told me you're threatening to ruin the wedding over clothing," she announced immediately. I closed my eyes. That's not what happened. "Oh, please. Brides and grooms are allowed to choose what they wear. From things that belong to them." She sighed dramatically. "Diana, sweetheart, your attachment to this dress doesn't sound healthy." That sentence hit harder than I expected. Not healthy. Like grief itself was embarrassing. Like loving my grandmother too deeply was somehow emotional instability. I kept my voice very calm after that, because anger suddenly felt useless. My grandmother raised me when nobody else did. That dress matters because she mattered. Well, Adrian feels rejected and humiliated by your reaction. I almost laughed.
Humiliated.
The man publicly wearing a dead woman's funeral dress for Instagram attention felt humiliated. Meanwhile, I was standing in my apartment, trying not to cry every time I opened my closet. Then she said the thing that finally changed something permanent inside me. You know, sometimes people cling to dead relatives because they're afraid of fully committing to the living.
Silence.
Absolute silence. Because suddenly, I could see the entire future stretching in front of me with terrifying clarity. Every grief minimized. Every boundary mocked. Every emotional attachment treated like an inconvenience if it interfered with Adrian getting attention. Very quietly, I said, I think I understand where he learned this behavior. Then I hung up. My hands shook afterwards so badly, I dropped my phone onto the kitchen counter. That night, I sat beside my closet, holding the sleeve of my grandmother's dress against my face, while trying to understand how someone could witness your pain so clearly and still choose themselves every single time. And somewhere, deep down, beneath all the heartbreak and confusion, a colder realization started forming. I wasn't deciding whether to forgive Adrian anymore. I was deciding whether I could survive marrying someone who saw my grief as competition. After the fight, Adrian moved into his friend's apartment. The silence between us lasted 2 days before he finally texted me at midnight. I can't believe you're choosing a dead woman's closet over your future husband. I stared at the screen, feeling something cold settle inside me. Not anger anymore. Clarity. Then my cousin called. Adrian had messaged her privately, trying to defend himself, saying I'd manipulated the family against him. He even contacted my aunt and told her people were too sentimental about old clothes. Old clothes. That dress held 40 years of funerals and heartbreak. My grandmother wore it while burying the people she loved most. But to Adrian, it was just aesthetic material. That was the moment I realized the problem wasn't the dress. It was his complete inability to respect grief unless it belonged to him. 2 days later, I drove to his friend's apartment and asked him to come outside. He looked exhausted, eyes swollen from crying, but I forced myself not to soften. I need you to listen carefully, I said. You stole my grandmother's dress, altered it permanently, mocked my feelings, and insulted my family instead of apologizing. He crossed his arms immediately. So you're seriously ending our future over fabric? There it was again.
Fabric.
Not betrayal, not disrespect. Fabric. And suddenly, I knew with absolute certainty there was nothing left to save. The wedding is off, I said quietly. His face went pale. Diana. No. Every time you had a chance to apologize, you chose yourself instead. He started crying then, genuinely crying, and part of me still hurt seeing it, because I loved him once. But love stopped being enough the moment he decided my grief was inconvenient. Calling off the wedding was messy. I lost thousands in deposits. Family members canceled flights. People asked uncomfortable questions. But once the story spread, nobody really blamed me. Because the truth sounded awful all by itself. He stole her dead grandmother's funeral dress for Instagram. Adrian eventually deleted the post after screenshots started circulating online. 2 bridesmaids even admitted he'd been mocking my attachment to Grandma behind my back for months, calling me stuck in grief. That hurt worse than the dress. Not the theft. The realization that while I trusted him with my pain, he quietly treated it like a flaw. The last conversation happened when his mother called me one final time. "You're going to regret this," she snapped. Maybe she expected me to hesitate. Instead, I said, "I'd rather regret leaving than regret marrying the wrong person." Then I hung up. Now the dress is back in my closet, shorter by 2 inches, damaged, but still hers. I took it to a conservator who carefully repaired what she could. Before I left, she touched the silk gently and said, "The integrity of the dress is still intact." I almost cried hearing that, because maybe the same thing was true about me. I'm not okay yet. Some mornings I still stare at old wedding reminders and feel sick. I missed a version of Adrian I thought existed. But every Sunday I make coffee, sit quietly beside my closet, and hold that black silk close enough to smell White Shoulder's perfume again. And every single time I think the same thing. My grandmother survived grief with dignity. She would have told me not to marry someone who turned love into performance and pain into inconvenience. And deep down, I know she would have been right.